For more videos on people's struggles, please subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Whenever you are an occupying force in another country, because Rwanda and Uganda occupy the DRC, you have the military power, especially when you are backed by the United States, and you still do not address the issue of this militia group. We know in the DRC that this is just a pretext to have military presence in the DRC that's continuous. The ADF for us is our weapons of mass destruction. Never been found. We do not know what they do. Yet, it's always a pretext for military presence.
On March 10, the United States blacklisted two extremist groups, one in Mozambique and the other in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The US has declared these groups to be foreign terrorist organizations over accusations of having links to the Islamic State or ISIS. In the DRC, the Allied Democratic Forces, or ADF for short, has been blacklisted, and its leader, Sika Musa Baluku, has been named as a specially designated global terrorist. Actions such as these by the US are seen as being a part of the war on terror. The US, however, has a long history of military intervention in the DRC and across the globe. Press releases and news reports have provided only minimum information in this instance of intervention in DRC. Is combating terrorism the only goal? What else is there to the picture?
The month of March had quite a few announcements. The US military making the move to have US military presence in DRC through the State Department declaring that there is a link to ISIS in DRC. We have an announcement with a new prime minister who's supposed to have his new cabinet released this week. So on the political field, that's what the Congolese are actually looking at the moment. We all are waiting to see what will happen. But as we know, there won't be much change around that new announcement, given the neoliberal path that the new president has taken. But back to the ADF question. When you look at the DRC, usually when you're reading news, people get very confused with what is really happening in DRC because they throw these acronyms at them. They will say ADF, or they will say CNDP, they will say M23. So we have become a home of acronyms. And whenever you read the news today, you see a new acronym and you see another acronym. It leaves you with this impression that this is just lawlessness. There is no hope. I don't even have the time to try to understand what is happening in DRC. But to me, it's very simple. The war in the DRC started in 1996. It's a war waged by US allies, Rwanda and Uganda. We invaded the Congo twice, in 96 and 98, and continue to support proxy rebel militias. Now, to specifically speak about the ADF, the Allied Democratic Forces, those are Ugandan rebels who have been in the DRC since the late 90s. They have some political claim. They believe that the rule of Uganda is not what the Ugandan people believe or fought for. They are somehow connected to a religious group. They say that they are Muslim fighters and so on. And then since the late 90s, even with the invasions of Rwanda and Uganda in the DRC, they have never been stopped. There is another rebel group similarly to that too, the FDLR rebel group. They are connected to the Hutu extremists who participated in the Rwanda genocide. The reason why I'm mentioning that Rwanda and Uganda invaded and still did not stop them is whenever you are an occupying force in another country, because Rwanda and Uganda occupy the DRC, you have the military power, especially when you are backed by the United States, and you still do not address the issue of this militia group. We know in the DRC that this is just a pretext to have military presence in the DRC that's continuous. The ADF for us is our weapons of mass destruction. Never been found. We do not know what they do. Yet, it's always a pretext for military presence. There have been numerous times where Uganda had military operations in the DRC. They had military operations where they didn't go after the militia groups. The New York Times reported that Ugandan soldiers who were in the Garamba Park in the DRC were not going after the ADF rebels. They were going after elephants to get the elephant tusks using helicopters and military logistics provided by the United States. So the New York Times already published that. We had the so-called Kony 2012, when they went after the Lord Resistance Army, which is another pretext of having US military power. At one time you had US youth actually clapping for US imperialism and militarism in Africa to go after another rebel group that never been stopped as well. So for all this time, they haven't been stopped. But something very gruesome has been ongoing for at least over the past 5 years. In the area called North Kivu, in two towns, one is called Beni and the other is Butembo, in that area, people in these towns have been killed in a very gruesome way, cut into pieces, burned to death, be it from babies to adults. People have shared information around this with the proper authorities and so on, and they are not being stopped. Each week you hear 10 people dead, 15 people dead, 20 people dead. But in all these attacks, when you read the press, they always say the ADF committed these crimes. And which is fascinating to me, because I'm wondering what type of investigation within 10 minutes, 20 minutes, or 24 hours of the killing, a journalist based in Kenya or Senegal writing an article for different Associated Press, putting out these news wires, which type of investigation have they done to know that those who committed the killing are ADF? But we have information, right, from the United Nations themselves. The United Nations Security Council mandated a group of experts since the early 2000s to provide reports on the situation in the Congo. They provide 2 yearly reports in June and in December. And the UN group of experts have documented the so-called ADF crimes. In their documentation, they have said things such as the ADF rebel groups in some areas speak Kinyarwanda. Kinyarwanda is a language spoken mainly in Rwanda. So these Muslim terrorists somehow speak a language that comes from Rwanda, where Islam is a minority. And it's been documented. You have these ADF rebels who do that. But beyond what's even in this UN group of experts report, even the people that we speak with on the ground, full disclosure, my family is from there. I've actually lost family members in their area. Whenever we speak to our contacts in these villages, they clearly tell us the attacks are known when they come, because they send a message say we are coming. It's usually close to Congolese army bases and UN forces who are in the DRC. When the killings take place, there is no military action from these armies. And after the killing, that's when you start seeing officials coming to try to find out what has unfolded. So people in the area are so angry at the UN. There was even a period a few years ago where the people of Beni and Butembo took stones and were throwing it at the UN peacekeeping forces, because they were saying, why are you here with the largest peacekeeping missions and you still can protect the population where your mandate is to protect the population? So the people in the area are very clear that these forces who are killing them constantly are not necessarily the ADF, but it's a ragtag of rebel groups who, for whatever political reasons, are not being stopped for over decades and are decimating the population. Some may argue because of the wealth that exists in these villages, the land and the mineral resources. There are evidence that the oil in Lake Albert, which is at the border of Congo and Uganda, extends all the way through Beni, going into the Virunga Park. This whole question about, do you exploit oil into the UNESCO historical park, where the people say we shouldn't be exploiting oil because it's gonna destroy the habitat, it's gonna destroy the environment. So this is continuous. When we're looking at the situation of Beni and Butembo, it's clear that the attacks, to me at least, and the people on the ground, is that the attacks are happening because of the land, the resources on the land. It's huge arable land. It has oil from, there's been some studies that have shown that the oil Congo has over 2 billion barrels of oil in one of its lake. The lake is called Lake Albert at the border of Uganda and Rwanda. There is at least an estimated 2.5 billion barrels of oil, and this oil extends from the border all the way to these towns, and then going all the way through the park, the Virunga Park, which is a UNESCO protected site. And there's this question around, should we exploit oil or not? And the people have resisted. We must protect the environment rather than exploiting oil. But during a period, at least say half a decade, in that area, massacre has taken place with no accountability to who is committing the crime and actually stopping them, when we know there is a strong military presence in the area to stop them, one being the UN peacekeeping forces of about 22,000 strong UN peacekeepers. You have the Congolese army, and you have had invading, occupying forces in the east of Rwanda and Uganda. All of them have not been able to stop these ADFs. The second one that now implicates the US much more, when the US State Department put out a statement saying that there is a link between the DRC and ISIS, is quite problematic. It's quite problematic because this has been dispelled by Congolese themselves and other international investigators. The UN group of experts in their report have written numerous times that there is no such link between the ADF of the DRC with ISIS. This started a few years ago. It was coming usually from Museveni of Uganda, the president of Uganda, where they will have press conferences in Kampala. They'll share with US officials that the ADF has linked to Al-Qaeda. The ADF has linked to Al-Qaeda, and as they did this comment, it was mainly to get US military support. And when they receive the US military support, they usually use it against their own civilians. Look at what unfolded in the past elections, the brutality that took place during the past Ugandan elections, where Ugandans themselves were brutalized by the military and by the state. So as the statement continued to happen, he had to take the UN group of experts to investigate. So they've said already numerous times, there is no such links. There is a former UN group of experts. His name is Dan Fahey. He wrote an article called Mr. X. And this article is very important because he described his experience as a UN group of experts. And in this article, he explained how a rebel, this person, was able to fool officials that he was an ADF soldiers and tried to link himself with terrorist groups. And he showed how the story was not true, very, very clearly detailing the article. So when you have a former UN group of experts who's providing evidence that one, these ADF rebel groups do not have a proper narrative, when the current UN group of experts are publishing at least 2 reports that I've seen, clearly stating that there is no link between the ADF and ISIS, why would the State Department in the United States put out a statement saying that they have a connection? Does the United States has better intel than the UN group of experts and Congolese themselves on the ground? I will argue absolutely not. And if they do have this type of level of details and information, Congolese will question that. So which means that you've known this connection for a while and failed to engage. Why now? We know why now. We are very clear that the United States is trying to implement its military presence in the DRC to counter China. The reason why they are implementing the base is nothing new. They have been wanting to build their base in Camp Base in Kisangani as a prime location, which is in the northeastern part of the DRC, that allows for any military operation in the area to be able to move from north, south, east, and west of Africa very fast, because you are really right at the center of the African continent. And there are reasons to believe, because of the area where they are, there is huge resources. We are clear that AFRICOM is not on the African continent for humanitarian reasons. We know on March 19th, the United States is doing a military operation in Accra, Ghana. My comment with this increased militarization of Africa, and particularly the Congo, is can the Congolese also open a US military base in any US cities, do military operations, protect Americans from terrorist groups, and so on? If we don't have this type of bilateral understanding, there is no rationale of having US military. You can't have an arsonist coming as a firefighter to try to put down the fire now, as we are very clear of why the war is. But the US is moving along with that plan. And why they're moving along with that plan? Right now, the president of the DRC is very close to the United States. He's being supported by the United States. It makes it very easy for the United States to be able to achieve its objectives, be it economic or military in the DRC. But for the Congolese, we won't stop shouting and expressing truth of what is unfolding to us. Just this March, on March 15th, I mean, imagine last month, actually in February, the Italian ambassador was killed. Still don't see the US investigation to determine who killed the Italian ambassador, but they can find out that ISIS is in the DRC. But after the death of the Italian ambassador, Congolese are still being killed. Just this past March 15th, this Sunday, Congolese were massacred in the same area. Of course, the press stated again that this is ADF. There are institutions also that have said that the ADF committed these crimes. I think the youngest person to be killed in this massacre was 2-year-old. Dozens of people were massacred, and it's not stopping. And we know this terrorism is not necessarily linked to ISIS. It's to break the spirits of resistance of the Congolese in this area, who have said, we are not going to stop fighting for our land. And it's happening in total impunity. But the way forward for DRC is for, as Congolese are fighting, looking at Kwame Nkrumah's challenge of the Congo, as he said that Congo's challenge is both internal and external. We knew, and we still know today, that Congolese will continue to fight for their own liberation. But the challenges that they face is that the external forces have military power that makes it hard for them to address the local challenges. So for the external forces, let's use Nkrumah's call of putting pressure on negative forces outside of the DRC that's destabilizing the DRC. So for all good people of the world, be it on the African continent or anywhere else, while Congolese people are fighting on the inside, we hope you will be fighting on the outside, exposing these lies that the ADF is connected to ISIS, exposing the increased militarization of the Congo and Africa, and uniting with the Congolese as they fight to liberate the country in 2021. And very soon, we won't see these lies continuing because people will be clear. What are these acronyms? These so-called proxies supported by Western nations, supported by Congo's neighbors to have a pretext for war. What are Congolese fighting for? We are fighting for liberation and control of our land and resources. And what is our final objective? We want humanity to live in justice, peace, and dignity.